All right. Hi, everyone. We're ready to get started? Yes. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Ridge Runners podcast. Marianna and I are super jazzed to be guest hosting tonight. We'll see how this goes. We're pretty excited for this opportunity. So we are turning the tables tonight and getting a chance to hear a little bit from Wes and Cam. They're usually on this side of things, and they get to ask runners all kinds of questions. And now Marianna and I get a turn to quiz them a bit and to get some of their perspective on a recent race and just running in general and a few other things they may have coming up. So we're pretty excited to be here tonight to chat a bit with Wes and Cam.
All right, so we're gonna get started. First, what's everyone drinking? Wes, what's on your agenda tonight?
The Roja Brewing project, that seems kind of like someone's senior project or whatnot. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, is this like for like a grade or something like that? But it's the High on the Hop IPA. It's actually pretty good, even though it's a Utah beer. But I'm excited to drink that one tonight. Cam, what about you?
So I have got the Big Sky Brewing Powder Hound, and let's look at this nice little fella on the can here. I definitely did not buy this because there was a cute dog on the label. I would never do a thing like that.
Fair. Marianna, what about you?
Well, I got the Party Jam Blackberry Sour Kettle Ale from Hermit Thrush Brewing out of Vermont. And since Sarah's only drinking tea tonight, I also have the June Shine Topical Citrus on standby in case I need it.
Yeah, I'm still kind of nursing a little bit of a sore throat from last week, but I do have my Rim to River mug. So shout out to the folks who made those beautiful mugs, and enjoying some nice hot tea to try to soothe my sore throat tonight. Marianna, are you going to kick us off with our first question?
I got you. All right. So Wes and Cam, both of you, we just want to hear about your running background since you know all about ours, and why Rim to River, both the documentary and why'd you guys choose to run the race, and what does it mean to you?
All right, Cam, I'll let you take this first one.
I was waiting for you to say that, couldn't take the first one yourself. But my running background, I don't know how many people quite know this, but it's not exactly your standard for most ultra runners. I was not a runner in high school or junior high or anything like that. In fact, I was on the track team in high school, and I threw the shot put in the discus, which is a much different vibe than most of your ultra runners, I would say. As Wesley's often referred to me, I was a washed up linebacker. I think even then I was already washed up. I was never that good. But I had a pretty catastrophic knee injury. I had to have reconstructive surgery my senior year, and because of that, I spent about 6 months going to see a physical therapist like 3 times a week, which is just a super wonderful thing to do when you're 17 years old. And part of the physical therapy was just like learning how to run again, because the ACL reconstruction and the other things that I had, like I fractured my kneecap, I partially tore my meniscus and my MCL too. Like it was like my leg deflated, like the whole thing. It was so surreal almost. It was, if you've ever felt like if you like the loose skin like underneath your arm or something when you're not flexing that muscle, that was like what my whole leg was like all the time. And so I had to like literally learn how to like run and like propriocept again during that period. And I kind of enjoyed it because by the time I got there, it meant that I was kind of coming out of things and like things were getting better. I was no longer in those like early days of rehab where my rehab involved, they were like, you need to just move your kneecap around with your fingers a little bit. And that is one of the worst things you can do. I hated it so much. Um, and I started college then, and I didn't quite fit in at college. I was a first generation student, and I wanted to stay fit. I'd always loved like exercise and weightlifting, and was big into like exercise science and like
Mhm.
programming weight training and stuff in high school. But I just had no desire to do it anymore. Like there
Yeah.
was like I was 18 years old, and I was like, I should never deadlift again in my life. This is stupid. This is pointless. I was getting no enjoyment out of it. So I started just kind of jogging because I knew I wanted to stay in shape, and
Mhm.
you know, wanted to sort of, I needed to find a way that like it would work. Um, and then around that same time, I saw on Netflix the Barkley Marathons documentary, the race that eats us young, the one that I'm sure all of us saw probably early on as
Yep.
ultra runners. And I distinctly remember thinking, because I grew up very outdoorsy, but it was just outdoorsy in the way of like, well, I'm just gonna go walk into the woods behind the house, and then we'll go from there. And kind of it reminded me, seeing what they were doing in Frozen Head a lot was like that. It's like no trails, you just navigate around the woods sort of as you understand them.
Mhm.
um, Little did I know I'd go to Frozen Head this year, and I was really wrong on what that place is like. But um, seeing that, it sort of clicked in my brain that like I can combine this thing that I know I love and I love to spend time doing, which is just anything in the outdoors. But then I can combine it with running. And once I kind of put those two things together, it really clicked for me, and it became this thing that I really love, and something that just really centers me. And then, doing my first race, I got involved with the community and felt sort of how welcoming and wonderful, and I've been hooked from there since. So, long story. Now it's Wesley's turn.
Yeah, so kind of similar in the regards that I wasn't a runner growing up, and I didn't like actually like run cross country or track, like most people did. A lot of runners do, I should say. But I was a ball sport guy all throughout my life, and so grew up playing basketball for 9 years. I played baseball for 9 years and soccer for 13 years through high school, and like that was kind of my main focus, was just all of those sports growing up, and just kind of being active in those ways was just kind of what I kind of got my fitness and exercise for. And then in high school, I kind of realized that I actually kind of liked running a little bit, but not like enough to like even join the cross country team or the track team. And I was playing soccer, and I was only down to one sport at that time, and I really could have done it. I could have probably hopped on the track team in the spring, done a different season, and would have been a fun experience. But I was just running like local 5Ks, just really kind of just getting out there. And I ran a 5 mile race with my uncle one time. And after that race, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to train for the Cleveland Marathon and run it." And I'm like, "I just beat you in this 5 mile race by like 4 minutes. Like, if you can run a marathon, I can run a marathon." And so that was kind of the starting point of, my training for my first marathon. Ran my first marathon at 16. Ran 4 additional marathons throughout my high school career. And then in college, I kind of realized that, marathons weren't really for me. I think my fastest time in that span was about 4 hours or so. So it wasn't like I was like crushing these marathons out of the park, but kind of just trying to finish them and enjoy the experience. But with the experience that I kind of gained from those, I was just so interested in going longer and seeing what that would kind of entail. So signed up for my first 50K my freshman year of college, did that. 6 months later, ran my first 50 miler. And then 6 months after that, ran my first 100K. And then 6 months after that, I DNF'd the Burning River 100. So that was kind of my first setback in my running career. And I had other races kind of in that progression as well. But it was kind of interesting that, I realized that the 100-mile distance is a distance that's special. It's nothing like, 50 milers, 50Ks. And that's kind of what instantly drew me to that once I hit that 100K mark. And so 6 months after that, I did complete my first 100 miler, and so I was super excited to kind of go out there and finish it. And that was before Rims River. That was the only 100 miler that I went into with, "Hey, I'm finishing this race at all costs." So it was kind of neat to go back to that mindset a little bit at this race, and it was I enjoyed how it played out this time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, before we go any further, we already have a chat question here from Paul DeFord. What position in soccer did you play, Wes? And why do you hate the cold?
Yeah, I played winger was kind of my best position, but especially in high school, just getting up and down the field. I would never get tired out there, and that was kind of the one thing I could pride myself on. I would definitely get beat, lose the ball, and then just try to catch up to people. That's kind of it was really the only thing I was good at in soccer. Now I just kind of watch it and enjoy it. But I hate the cold because it just sucks. I don't really have a reason for it. I dress many layers and stuff like that, but I love running in the heat. Summer days are my favorite. Give me 90 degrees and sunny every single day.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I think you both mentioned kind of your background and that sort of progression that a lot of us as ultra runners experience, right? It sort of starts out with something maybe shorter, and then all of a sudden things just escalate, typically kind of quickly. So you both had that experience of doing the Rim to River documentary. What made you decide to do the race? That's a different thing than spending your whole day there, documenting and recording everybody else doing the race. But what kind of pushed you over the edge to make the decision to run Rim to River?
I can lead this one off again as well.
Mm-hmm.
Give Wesley plenty of time to think about his response here. If I remember correctly, I was kind of the one who even floated the idea of doing the documentary about this race. I found out about it. I forget how. I don't know if I got email or if I just saw it on like my Instagram Explore page or something, or if it just like came to me in a dream, right? But I somehow found out that they were putting on a 100-miler in West Virginia, and I was like, I want to do this race. And then of course, 2020 being what 2020 was, I had 2 stress fractures that summer and was finishing up grad school. So I was in no way prepared to run this race. And I just kind of floated the idea in our group chat, like, why don't we do this? And then next thing I know, Wesley's emailing Bryant and figuring out logistics. And I'm like, ooh, I guess we're doing this.
Again, things escalate really quickly with ultra runners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even have the guy's contact info, and then Wesley just sent a screenshot of the email after he sent it out, and I was like, okay, I guess I committed. But because I knew I wanted to get into it and do it, and spoiler alert for those who don't know, it's like I did not finish Rim to River 100 this year, but even going into it, knowing that, never having done 100, just seeing it, you kind of know and you understand that the 100 miles is a special distance, like Wesley mentioned. And I wanted to sort of, treat it right and go about this the right way. So I signed up, I stayed up till New Year's Eve only for that, until midnight to sign up to put my name on the list, because I knew I wanted it to be this one. And no stress fractures this year, but plenty of other stuff that we can talk about. But it was kind of, knowing that it was going to be in West Virginia, and Appalachia really holds a special place in my heart, being from there in Ohio. And then also what Bryant was able to do with this race in the first year that we saw making the documentary, not even to talk about, funding a nonprofit with this and the scholarships he's given out because of it, but just the community feeling and just the energy that was there in the very first year was unbelievable. Like, you could not have told me that you could have told me this race has been going on for 25 years and I would have believed you, because
Agreed.
that's the way things were there on the very first year. It's like, I got to come back. Wesley's said it a few times himself, this is our 10-year thing. We're going to be here the next 10 years. I'm going to be there in some capacity next year. I doubt I'll be putting on a bib, but, I'm going to be there. I don't want to speak for him, but, we'll see what he has to say.
Yeah, no, kind of going off that, Cam, like the one thing that, like you kind of told the story about us just reaching out and trying to like create the documentary, it was kind of inspiring, and, kind of shows how, the kind of person that Laura and Bryant are, that they'd like, even accept that, we were basically just cold email out of the blue. Hey, here's who we are. We've like no other previous film documentary experience up to this point, but can we just come out and like bounce around to all the aid stations, like, give us full access. We could go anywhere we want basically on the course, and, just kind of that support from them to kind of do that was something that, really stuck with me, and especially in a tough part of my life, at that time, I was going through kind of a toxic work environment, and kind of a week before the race actually happened, my grandpa went into hospice, and he's kind of the one who taught me all things about video production and films and whatnot. And it was kind of a funny thing. Like, I talking with the group, and he was like, hey, like, I basically asked him, like, hey, are you gonna be okay? Like, can I go down and do this? Or he encouraged me to go down and film this race instead of being this. He joked around and being like, hey, I'm not gonna like die this weekend. Like, you can go do this because this is important to you, and this is like kind of what he wanted to do. And so for me, like, being able to do that and then have the whole community of Rim to River there, like, in the time that I needed it most, I knew I had to come back and run it as a race director, or run it as a runner, and it was just so special to be out there this year. And yeah, it was crazy.
That's really cool to hear. Yeah. I mean, I ran it last year and unfortunately couldn't, put in the time commitment because of grad school, but I knew I had to come down there, and that's why I faced Sarah. It's just such a special, environment. Everything's amazing. The scenery is beautiful, and it was such a blast just even like pacing and bouncing around the aid station. So I totally get that. So after the documentary, did you guys feel like you knew, a lot about the course, the area? Were you super like prepared for the race? Did anything surprise you during the race?
I'll take this one. Creating a documentary about a race and then editing it is 100% a cheat code for knowing the course. Like, the hours and hours that kind of go into it, and then also just like seeing the different spots from multiple angles. It's the second best thing to actually running the race itself, or running parts of the course. And even you could argue that the course looks different on race day than it does if you just did a training run in September or whatnot. And so for me to be able to see that in our whole team, Cam could talk about this as well, but I felt very comfortable at so many intersections and just at different parts and aid stations, knowing exactly what the environment's going to be like, kind of through that. Obviously the film was 30 something minutes, but we had 15 hours of footage or whatnot. So there's a lot of other stuff that didn't get included in that. And so that was kind of a part that I felt incredibly comfortable with, all the aspects of that part of it.
Yeah, I probably could have used you during the race this year because I kept kind of doing is this familiar? Do I remember this from before? I don't know. Did I really run this race last year? I tend to do a lot of that during the race. So it is a nice advantage to know the course so well in and out. How about you, Cam?
Yeah.
Did anything surprise you?
I mean, yeah, it surprised me how bad I felt so early. But I will say, in terms of like knowing the course, I agree with everything Wesley said. It was an absolute cheat code. I did not feel like out of place ever, like I knew what climbs were coming where, what to expect from the course, what to expect from the aid stations and everything like that. So I just, it almost felt like too good in my mind. Alex Jackson and Max Gavazzi are in the chat now. They were part of my crew, and I was going into it like very almost haphazard. I was like, I don't need a plan, like, and they were like, can you tell us like details, please? Like, we haven't been here before. But I felt very good. It's like, I know when I'll see you, I'll know kind of what I need, at these different times. And, as Wesley mentioned, I did run, like 26 or 27 miles over that weekend. The year before, we saw Long Point, we saw every aid station, and it felt very familiar, even in the parts where it's like, I'm on trails that I haven't seen before, where this story started, and then where the story's going to end, right? Between the aid stations. So I very much was like, this feels good. It's like Wesley said, it's an absolute cheat code. I think everybody should do it before their next race.
Everyone should do a documentary for every course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be a lot of great footage to watch. That would be excellent. I will say, Cam, I think you may have been feeling crappy, but during the race, every time I saw you, you were the most content runner out on the course. Like, I don't know if happy is the right word, but you just seemed content. You were like, I'm here. This is where I belong. Just doing my thing. It was really refreshing to see you just look so even keeled. So that may not have been how you were feeling inside, but that was how I experienced your emotions during the race.
Oh man, that's good to know. I get that comment a lot where people are like, oh, you're having a bad race, like, but you look okay. And I'm like, that's not what's going on. I'll attribute that to like my my mindfulness practice that I have. And that like I kind of, one thing that I always just try to sort of like be there, and trail running is like a big part of it because it really kind of it forces you to be there. I mean, I can think distinctly about times in in races or training runs where I was like not there. I was too focused on something else, and I've tripped over a rock and nearly taken a header. I mean, I'm looking out my window now and across the river there, going up the Hellgate Canyon Trail. Like 3 weeks ago, I was having a bad day and I was too focused on other things. I nearly fell like 300 feet off the side of this trail over there. And it was a really great reminder. And I kind of, my mental preparation for the race was, like, this is going to take a long time. You need to just be in the moment and, run the mile that you're in and not worry too much about whatever the next mile is. And then I think also I wasn't letting myself sort of negative self-talk either. That's been a big change for me this year. And, growing up in sort of like football culture, especially, it's like a lot of negative self-talk from your teammates, from your coaches as, a motivator. And some people will even say that like, oh, this is a great motivator for running. And I hate it. It's terrible. I think no one should do it, right? You only need to be hyping yourself up, right? Because even if you run an ultra and you finish last place, you're like one of the most extraordinary, ordinary people to ever exist. And so like this idea that I'm gonna go and be in just this beautiful, incredible place around some of the most kindest, caring people who are sacrificing their own time to come out and like give me cups of mashed potatoes in the woods randomly, and I'm gonna be cranky and I'm gonna be like mean to them, like that's just such a shitty idea. And then like this idea that I'm gonna go do this just truly ridiculous thing, and then I'm gonna be mean to myself during it. And this is the thing that's supposed to make me happy. Why am I not happy during the action? So I think that's probably kind of where that came from. And I will also say that, the moments where I was seeing folks that I knew from Ridge Runner Nation, those were my best moments in the race, in terms of how I was doing mentally. So maybe, you couldn't see physically what I was feeling or where I was at with that, but seeing people on the course really gave me like a lot of a mental lift, just from, the different random members of Ridge Runner Nation who were all out there.
Yeah, I definitely feed off that a lot too. And Cam, I feel like you kind of touched on this, but Wes, were there any sort of takeaways or lessons learned for you during this race? And then I want to come back and hear from you, Cam, if there's others that you didn't get a chance to touch on. Because I feel like every race experience is different. You kind of walk away with these nuggets of information that you get to take with you. What was that for you this time around?
Yeah, for me, like this was one of the races, and there's only been a couple so far in my running career where I absolutely just went for it. Like this is an opportunity for me to kind of go outside of my comfort zone and really push myself. I kind of strive for that, in my personal life and, my life outside of running with a lot of things. But for running, for whatever reason, it was always about just, maybe it's because of how I started. How I started was just, let's just finish these distances and complete it, because that was a big deal to me. But now it's starting to be like, okay, well, how quick can we actually do this? And so this was the second time that I've kind of done that recently. First time was the Shawnee 50 miler, and it worked out for me that day. And so for this time, it was, just trying to get out there, go out smart, but also, run the race that you think you can run. And it was fun. I mean, from early on, everyone took out the race super fast. Like that was one thing that kind of just blew me away. It's like I was running, 10-minute pace through the first 20 something miles, 30 miles or what have you. And, there were 15, 20 people ahead of me. And, I remember running with Rick Homan at some point, and he was like, yeah, don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Just focus on what you're doing, because everyone's either going to come back to you, they're going to blow up, something's going to happen. There's no way that everything kind of goes well for everyone. And, that advice was really key for me in that moment, because, for me especially, I'm someone who puts a ton of pressure on myself with running and just with life. And so kind of having someone to calm me down in that moment early on was super helpful. And the miles just kind of flew by. We ran from mile 7 to 27 together, and then kind of went our separate ways there. But yeah, for me, the lesson that I learned from this race was definitely just go for it, even though, it can be scary. You don't know how fit you're going to feel. You don't know how you're going to feel at certain points. But, good things happen when you just put yourself out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I saw you coming into Long Point at like 38 and you just looked like you were in the zone. So that was really cool to see. Did you experience any lows during the race? And if so, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, so kind of going through the race day, like the first 30 or so were all pretty groovy. Like my focus for this race was get in and out of aid stations. I had an incredible crew of JD3 and his fiance Jackie out there with me, and we were super efficient at aid stations. I'm talking like 2 to 3 minutes at max for the crew ones, and at the non-crew ones, I was probably less than 60 seconds at those. And so that was kind of my big thing, was just kind of keep moving through those and kind of take care of yourself. First 50 miles, I mean, it was just a party seeing everyone on the turnarounds, the out and backs, and I really enjoyed those interactions with Regeneration members and so many people out there on the course. The aid stations were absolutely electric. Coming down into Fayette Station the first time was incredible, and then the second time was probably even better. And that was kind of the early parts of my race. But the one thing that kind of I wish I would have done differently is probably having a pacer from 58 to 79. So I did not have a pacer for that section, and that's kind of when it gets dark. So I got up to Long Point for the second time just before the sun officially set, and thankfully I was running with Michael Schreiber and Jamie Hanks at the time, and I kind of just like literally told them like, hey, I'm just gonna hang on until you guys drop me, kind of thing, and just to kind of make the miles go by a little quicker and to have some share some miles with someone in the dark. So that was kind of my mindset from 50 to 60 or so. They eventually went a couple miles ahead of me and came into the Arrowhead aid station kind of in a rough spot. Not totally out of it, but just definitely wanting to get in quick, get some calories. And I was starting to get really cold at that time. And so I was like, I need to run these next 9 miles pretty well to stay warm. And thankfully, it's one of the more runnable sections of the course. I was able to kind of do that, turned on some music, low volume, and kind of just grinded through those 7 miles. So overall, that 21-mile section was pretty much as best case scenario. If you could have wrote it up like before the race for me, but still kind of having a pacer there would have definitely helped me move probably a little quicker. And then obviously, as things got dark, but it did kind of propel me for when I did pick up a pacer at 79. Those miles at the end kind of clipped by until mile 92, when I had my lowest moment of the race, where I absolutely bonked coming out of the final climb up to Concho Rim, and that was really rough. That was a tough spot. I ended up kind of just coming into Concho Rim, taking a ton of time. It was probably only 6 to 10 minutes or so at that point, cuddled around the fire, really cold, drinking coffee and trying to get as much hot food in me as I can. And it was really funny. At the time, Alyssa Chance came over to me and she's like, how long have you been here? And I'm like, 8 minutes or so. And my crew graciously said like, oh, it's only been like 4. Like they tried to like go it down. And like, you're sitting down, time goes really fast. Like I knew it was longer than how I felt. And she's like, okay, 8 minutes is long enough. You got to go. And I was like, okay, looks like I'm getting out of here. And so I got up and continued on. And, 1 or 2 miles later, I think I just had a really low on calories. And a couple miles later, I was feeling good, ran the last couple miles of the race. But the lowest moment for me definitely came at mile 92.
How about you, Cam, before we get to a few more questions from the chat? Anything else to add about lessons learned or low points?
Yeah. Oh, no, I've got plenty of low points to pick from. I do want to say, though, that was a pro transition there, Sarah, to get, and, like, we'll get to the chat questions soon. Like, you guys are doing great. Just want to
thanks.
provide that feedback. I don't even feel like we prepped it all. But, in terms of low moments, yeah, I mean, I think, frankly, going into it, as many people know, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but 12 weeks out, I broke up with a long-term partner, and that was really difficult change. And I remember distinctly talking with like Wesley specifically, and then some of my other friends like Alex Jackson, John, Nick, being like, I think I'm out of Rim to River. Like, I don't think I'm mentally going to have it to train or to do this in like the immediate aftermath. And I remember specifically Nick giving me the advice. He was like, wait till the first week of October to pull your name off the list. And by then I had been living in Missoula for about a month, and just like all of a sudden running was so much fun again. And I was getting so much joy out of it. I was like, okay, I have to go, and I have to kind of give this a shot. But you know, I kind of came into it with not having had a great year of training or racing already, and then kind of having, for, those kind of more emotional reasons, lost a good bit of the training I was supposed to do for this race. And then going through the massive life change of moving 3,000 miles across the country, that things did not look great going into this. In fact, Wesley was visiting last weekend, and he mentioned, like, yeah, you were trained just like I did for Grindstone in 2017, like put in a great 6-week block, but nothing else. And it takes a lot more than that to run 100 miles, and so the low moments really started early on, where it was just like, this feels harder than it's supposed to, like this should be easier. And it's like, I'm not running fast, I'm not pressing, but it's hard. And I think some of it in the early miles, I wasn't prepared for the way being stuck in a conga line on single track makes you alter your stride a little bit, especially in the rockier terrain. I didn't feel like I could run quite at my own pace. It was either a little too slow or just a little too fast the whole time. And I think that's kind of where things started. I remember as soon as mile, 10 being like, this feels harder than the 30 miler I did as my last big training run 2 weeks before this. It's like, and I'm at mile 10, and that's not, not to talk poorly on the New River Gorge, but it's a very different kind of mountain you're in there. And it just sort of, from there, it kept growing, like, why is this so hard? Like, this shouldn't be this hard, and then I eventually, by the time I got going up the Kmore Miners Trail, and I'll mention, I really did only have 2 kind of good moments in the race that I felt physically good. And that was climbing out of Kennard, like walking up that hill, and I'd walked the whole thing, but that felt great.
I like that spot a lot too.
Yeah. And then climbing up the Kmore Miners Trail, I felt good physically, but just like mentally, I was like, I've got 63 more miles of this, like 65 more miles of this. It's like, I've run 50 miles before, and I've not felt this bad at this amount of time. And I kept doing all the things that I tried, I kind of needed to do. I went to the aid station, drank a bunch of water, I ate a bunch of potatoes, and it never clicked physically. And then by the time I was, descending down into Fayette Station for the first time, it was, I was like, this is just a matter of time, like, I can't start running again, just because my body won't let me. And then I also can't, it's like, I can't keep walking because I'm just going to get caught by the cutoffs. And, at Fayette Station, my lovely crew, and I'll give them all a shout out here, Jamie Hanks, Max Gavazzi, Amy Cruzan, and Alex Jackson, they did everything right, and like, they got me back out there and they got me walking again. But by the time I got to 50, it was just, I had like an hour on the cutoff, and I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, like this hurts too much for what it is. And then especially, I think, because going into it, I had this attitude of like, I've got nothing to prove, like this, finishing this race doesn't fundamentally change who I am or change my value or change whether or not I belong here or I deserve to be at these races or hosting the Ridge Runners show on other occasions. That I didn't feel like I had to do it in a way that, would have maybe got me up out of the chair at that last aid station and kept me pushing. But it was, like, okay, just didn't go so well. We're going to go back to the drawing board and we'll see, here once I'm a little less emotionally attached to it, and we'll go from there. Cause it's something I want to come back, and I definitely want to do. I'll be, I think I mentioned it in the chat for our show with the winners, with Caleb and Holly Ann, where it's like, I'll be back. It's going to be like 3 to 5 years, we'll see, but I'm definitely going to be back at this race with a bib on eventually.
Yeah. And I think the things you're describing are super relatable. The idea of like, when you just know, like it's not feeling right. This usually feels easier. No one would say running 100 is easy, but you kind of know that feeling in your gut when it's not going how it should be going for you. And that's really hard to pull yourself out of. And I think a lot of runners also can relate to how we run to escape some emotional challenges. And then also emotional challenges affect our running deeply and in ways that actually end up being quite physical. So I think all the things you're talking about, Cam, are so relatable. That is a question that keeps showing up in the chat. I think you're seeing it too. People want to know, are you going to be back to the 100 distance? So you said rim to river maybe in a few years. Is the 100 on the horizon for you? Another 100? And then what's the other? A Warhammer in 2022?
Yeah, 100 is on the radar. It's a special distance, and I am committed enough to myself and my goals and this community that I know that's, excuse me, that's something that I want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me again. I don't have a timeline for it, you know?
Yeah.
And I joke around 3 to 5 years. That's like, the mail will get here in 3 to 5 business days, you know?
I was gonna say that's the most generic answer. It's like,
Yeah.
it won't be forever. It's not gonna be right away.
You could, if my boss, calls me on Microsoft Teams tomorrow during the workday, and Kathleen is like, hey, like, when are you going to attempt another 100-miler? I'm like, yeah, we'll see you in 5 years, But yeah, no, I'm going to come back to the distance. I don't have anything on the calendar for that distance there, just because I think both physically and mentally, I'm not quite ready for it. And that was the big lesson I'm taking away from Rim to River. And it's not a judgment on myself in any way, positive or negative. It's just I'm not ready, and I'm gonna learn over the course of the next few years what it kind of feels like to be ready. And then when that comes, Bryant, catch me on, January 1st at midnight. I'll be back. And then about Warhammer, I would love to go back to the Sheltowee Trace area just in general. I think it's wonderful. And I love backpacking too, but I don't know if I can justify flying back east that often for races, because with what our schedule potentially looks like, ridge on those things,
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Down goes the shoddy 50 thing.
Are those medals falling down in the background?
Yes, that's one of Wesley's.
My life is in shambles.
He's got such a nice apartment too.
I feel like
won't
that's
stay
bad
on the
luck
wall.
or something.
Yeah, it's wild.
There was a couple other questions. One was, did either of you film at all this year?
There was no
During
content.
Rim Tour, yeah.
Nope, I can't. Do you go live from Instagram on a long point like you said you were?
I joked around about that with the crew. I was gonna do an Instagram update out from on Long Point because it was going to be going way too fast to do that. We couldn't put that on him. But no, I did not. Long Point, I didn't even take a picture at Long Point even. I kind of wanted to just be there when I was there and focus on just everything I was feeling. And of course, where Long Point was, is you just heard me describe my race. I kind of knew at that point, and I had just seen Jessica Koplowitz on the way. I was heading out, she was heading back, and Jamie Oney as well, where, it felt really great to see them out on the course. But it was just like, I just kind of know how my day's going, So no content was created. I left the GoPro in Montana. Was never part of the plan for us to film on race day.
I think it's nice to kind of have that division, between what you're doing, depending on your purpose for being there. Well, I want to do one more chat question. I feel like I kind of need to, because it's one of my pacer who brought me into the finish line this year, who I have a love-hate relationship with at the moment, because that was a lot of sprinting at the end that I was promised I wouldn't have to do again. But Don asked about Arbuckle Creek and what's the cheat code for getting across without falling in. And he says he's 3 for 3 on almost falling in. I'm pretty sure he got a good dunk this year. He went ahead of me and dunked himself in. And so I could kind of gingerly walk across and not feel bad about how difficult it was for me to get across this year. You guys have a good cheat code for Don?
So I'll tell you
That's
mine.
all you, Wes.
you did make it to the first one, but
I did.
I did. So the first time I went through it, I just went right through the water, just right up to the high ankle or whatever. I guess maybe mid-calf or whatnot. But I just wanted to go right through it, didn't want to bother. And I was running with Rick at the time, and he just like pranced right along a rock and just made it look super easy. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, he kept his feet wet, and it was awesome. But I was like, I just can't do that right now. I need to like not focus on falling in the water. But on the way back, totally different mindset in the middle of the night. I was like, Michael Owen, he was my pacer at the time. I was like, listen, you need to do something creative here. Like, you need to figure out what the best rock formation is. Like, left, right, let's make a game plan here. Let's run like a play in soccer or something like that. So luckily I had the agility to hit 2 rocks and make it over the second time with not touching the water. So I was proud of that.
I like how your return trip is better when I think 99% of runners are like gingerly managing their way out, like really like a gazelle. And then the way back is kind of like, oh, what do I even do about this? But Wes is like, no, I got it on the way back.
Yeah.
No problem.
So this one's for Wes. I know during Holly Ann and Caleb's show, you were keeping what you were eating during the race a secret until tonight. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so nutrition. I should preface this by like saying, don't take nutrition advice from me. I'm not like an expert on this, and I'm still a lifelong learner in the nutrition subject when it comes to ultra running. But this race, I did kind of hit it out of the park for me, which isn't always the case. And I did have the gnarly in my handheld, which was awesome to get those liquid calories in. I was basically taking that drink a bottle between all the aid stations. I had just one soft glass of water up in my front pouch, and I honestly hardly even touched that throughout the day. Sometimes I'd go through it, sometimes it would be totally full when I entered the aid station. But outside of that, I used the Spring Energy gels, probably again about 1 per aid station, so probably just about like less than 1 an hour, I'd say, for that. And then on top of that was just the solid food. So the quesadillas were absolutely incredible. I did that for the first 58 miles, and then I think going up from Fayette again, that's when I made the transition to the mashed potatoes. And that was a big transition for the rest of the day, is just doing mashed potatoes the rest of the race. And so that was kind of my game plan. I think I had coffee and maybe some soup at Concho Rim when I was really struggling there at the end. But overall, nutrition-wise for me, it was a pretty awesome day, and I was thankful for that.
Did you have a warm cookie from Buddy the Elf at the Arrowhead station?
I forget what they had, and we were talking about. I came in and I was like, "Are those meatballs?" and they were like, "No, but we should get meatballs for next year." And I forget what they were called, but they were like some snack thing that was in a ball shape.
Oh, the protein bombs. I had like 5 of them, even though I was pacing for 20 miles. They were epic. Yeah.
I left with like a bunch of those. Like, those were absolutely incredible. I have
Wait,
no idea.
you thought they were meatballs?
Oh yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure they were like peanut butter, right?
Yeah, they had like M&Ms and peanut butter. I found one in my running vest the other day, and I tried to eat one, and it was a little stale, but.
Yeah, it was just like a meatball shit, like not like a big meatball, like one of the mini ones, like nothing crazy. But I just thought it was like a little meatball. But
you guys don't do M&Ms and meatballs where y'all live? That's a big Burton, Ohio thing,
Oh, okay. No, that's good to me. So Cam, Alex Jackson wants to know if you're going to pace him next year. And also from our questions, what is something that you can't leave an aid station without?
So I'll kind of combine these. The answer is yes, Alex. If you sign up for Rim to River next year, I'm 100% there to pace you. Because this then ties into something I can't leave an aid station without. But you'd think there's a lot of mining in Montana too, like West Virginia, that pepperoni rolls would have also made it here. They have not. That's something that needs to come west. I don't know who can arrange this for me, but it needs to happen. But I will 100% be there. And the thing that I can't leave an aid station without is, if it's Fayette Station, I'm not going to not eat as many pepperoni rolls as I can fit into my hands. In part because I had to get on a connecting flight even. Come on. Like, I'm not going to go to West Virginia and not take advantage of that. So yeah, pepperoni rolls is your answer.
I think you should use the Marianna strategy and like tuck a bunch of them in and then just take them on the plane with you. Go for it.
Definitely. I was like, Sarah, in case you need any of these, like, I got them, I got you. And she's like, no, I'm good. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna eat them.
Like, they're definitely for Sarah. Don't worry, aid station workers.
Yeah, definitely.
How about you, Wes? What can't you leave an aid station without? I'm sorry.
I think just yeah, whatever the game plan is for that day. So there was definitely some things I did leave an aid station without, but it didn't, like a battery one time and some other nothing crazy like a headlamp or whatnot. But for me, it's just, I guess, focusing on whatever feels good at the time. So there's no like one thing. Sometimes it's Coca-Cola, sometimes it's, quesadillas. And the funny thing is, like, I hate quesadillas and PB&J on the regular day-to-day basis. I'm willing to put that out there. Peanut butter's the worst. I know, I said it. But like at a race environment in the ultras, I just like love that food. And so, or in training runs especially. So like that's the kind of stuff that like I save for race day so I can enjoy them at aid stations.
Fair.
Cool. How about, what ball sport do you think that you could beat most ultra runners in? We'll ask Cam first.
I'm gonna be honest. I really don't think there is one. I feel inclined to like want to say football, but like that's just not true. I wasn't that good of a football player. And also just like my mindset is so different. Like I can't imagine trying to tackle somebody at this point in my life, even in like a life or death situation. I'm like, I probably can't do that anymore.
I thought your strategy was like to get people to the ground if you're going to fight them. I've heard you say this like 1,000 times now.
Oh yeah, that's not a ball sport. That's
like a tackle though.
No, I wrestled too. That's not a ball sport.
Okay.
Trust me.
It doesn't count.
I promise. Yeah, it's a different thing. I can show you. But if I got to go with one, I think I'm just going to go really surreal and pick one that I think neither of us are going to have any experience in, and I'm going to win with dumb luck. So my answer is going to be cricket.
Oh,
That was unexpected.
Yeah, I think so.
How about you,
I like
Wes?
that.
So I don't want to brag or anything like this, but I am going to say this answer because I wholeheartedly believe it, that I could beat every single ultra runner at every single ball sport. I think, there's a lot of runners that I can't beat at running. That's 100% guaranteed. But ball sports, I'm going to take myself every single time. So if you want to play me in, whether it be soccer or ping pong, tennis, pickleball, basketball, football, the list goes on and on. Let's set something up and we can get a Ridge Runners Ball Sports Challenge. I'd love to make it happen with some Ridge Runner Nation members.
Yeah, I'm
I
pretty
think
sure.
I challenge.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say I'll challenge you to soccer.
Boom.
Bring it.
There we go. PK's
So
best.
I'll stand on the sidelines and watch, because I'm pretty sure back in middle school, some ball sport coach was like, can you please take her on like the track team or something? Because she can't do this. This isn't working. This basketball, baseball. No, thank you. Make her go run.
I got kicked out of ballet and put into soccer, and I did much better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kicked out of ballet? Like
You're not supposed to kick people in ballet. So.
Literally. It was bad, yeah.
So
Like I just remember, like at my dance recital, my mom and my sister were sitting in the middle of the front row, and they were just laughing at me. And yeah, I got kicked out, and I found soccer. So it's probably for the best, but still pretty bad.
We're not always known as a coordinated bunch. There is something I've been super excited to ask you guys. So you usually ask most of the guests on the show. Oh, you both looked really nervous for a second there.
I was like, oh no, what do we usually ask?
I was like, we ask questions?
That is part of the format, at least what I've heard anyways.
Yeah.
You usually ask a dream person, anyone in the history of time, who would we run with? And I want to ask you, who would be your dream podcast guest? Maybe a runner. I mean, that's kind of your thing, but if not a runner, who would be your dream guest on a podcast?
Cam, I'm going to let you take this one.
Okay. I did represent Ridge Runners on the Texas the Texas something running show with Briston Rains. I forget the name of it off the top of my head, and I also think he changed it. But he asked the same question, and the answer I gave then is not the answer you want to hear, Sarah. But it was, I just want to have on whoever the community wants to have on. I don't really see or understand Ridge Runners as sort of like my podcast or like my platform. I'm just kind of like a guy who, because of my academic background, I have interviewing skills. And then because of the tech stuff that Wesley and John can do, I get to go live on YouTube and ask people these questions, and then hopefully represent this community that I care about so much and ask the questions that they want to ask, which is why I love doing this live and having a live chat where anybody can kind of chime in and, let me know what I'm not asking and what they want to know. So that's my like stock answer. If I did have a Cam Rentsch side podcast, right? I think the answer is going to be Mike Foote or Knox Robinson. I admire them both so much. I mean, obviously, like Mike, I'm a guy who moved from Ohio to Missoula without knowing anybody. But the way that he's talked about like his recovery from eating disorders and his mental health struggles, and then also the way that he really cherishes like vulnerability amongst men, really speaks to me and is something that I really want to try to emulate in my own life. So it's also weird because I look up to him a lot and I've just like seen him around town. It's kind of strange. He's taller than you'd expect. But where I both do kind of have him on this pedestal. And I want to recognize that he's a normal human being that I could just like see at the grocery store like after this show ends.
Yeah.
But that's the answer if I'm answering totally for myself, selfishly.
Well, we're going to get Cam his own show eventually. He was talking about how Nick Voss is the only one that has its own show named after him, and Cam was feeling a little left out. So, maybe in 5 years from now, we can get Cam his own side podcast. But for me, if I had to pick a guest, someone that I want to have on the show to kind of have as a dream celebrity, it's going to be a similar answer to Cam here. It's the 74 people we had on previous to tonight's show that come on weekly and share their stories with us and allow me to progress as an ultra runner. A lot of these episodes, I'm on it live and I'm listening, obviously, and asking the questions, but I oftentimes, and I'd say 99% of the time, go back later, whether it be a day or two later, and re-listen to the episode because it's different when you're on it versus when you're actually like engaging as a listener. And so for me, I've taken so many things from different people, and even like most recently, like Carol Youngblood, she was talking about like visualizing her race out and all the prep work that goes into her 100-mile planning, and I used that 2 weeks later. I went all in on, making all this 25-page spreadsheet basically for all my crew info. That was pretty egregious, I will say, but that's the kind of stuff that like, I'm improving as an ultra runner because I have the opportunity to be on here with Cam, John, and Nick every week. So that's something I'm thankful for. But, if I did have to give someone that I'd love to have on here, it'd be Sally McRae. I think she's an incredible runner who, not albeit East Coast, but I think she would be an incredible person to kind of learn from and have a conversation with.
I do want to point out, Wes, that we've had more than 74 guests because, usually like a couple per show. But I do, I do also agree with your sentiment. I think you hit the nail on the head. We are learning so much by being guests. And, I distinctly remember being at Rim to River and being like, I feel so bad right now. And then like thinking like, yeah, well, like Jason Roop just did this, like thinking, oh, like, do you remember like Tracy Falbo, throwing it way back, where she talked about, her walk-up song, 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, a song that I love, by the way. Where she's like, some days, like her race at Canal Corridor, she's like, you just have to clock in. You're not going to feel good, but you got to do it anyway. And I remember thinking that it's like, can I have this day where I just clock in and, we'll see what happens. And I'm going to do it even though I don't feel good. Obviously, it didn't quite work out, but, I've learned so much. And frankly, I'm so much of a better runner because of the guests that we have on this show. It's been really incredible.
Kind of going off that real quick too, I remember there were a couple ones I was listening to kind of get my mindset right for the 100-mile distance specifically, and Rachel Spalding was talking about specifically about how she just never had a low moment during her 100 miles, and I was like, okay, well that sounds like a cool thing, I should try that. And then Katie Rosar talked about on her episode, she was like, once I got to mile 80, my mindset shifted, like, once you get to 80 it's easy because the last 20 miles of a 100 mile are the easiest. And so once I hit mile 80 at the race, I was like, oh, the last 20 miles, it's the easiest. That's what it's supposed to be. It's just crazy to kind of, take little tidbits from so many people and apply them in your own ultra running career.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's also interesting, like the things we tell ourselves to get us through that, like, we just lie all the time, but it's cool.
We just lie.
Don't
So
listen
true.
to us. We're just
So
full of
true.
it.
Literally. But so Wes, there's a lot of chatter on the chat about taking you on for a soccer match. So just so you know, that might be in the works. But Caleb Bowman wants to know what's next for you, Wes. Probably because he wants to sign up for the same race and beat you. But
Caleb, I'd love to, race you again, and hopefully it happens sooner than later. Maybe we can pick some distance, like a 40-yard dash. I think that's possibly something I could maybe take you in. Maybe not though, if I had to think. But what's next for me? I am honestly not entirely sure yet what 2022 looks like in terms of my running calendar. I will say that this year I only towed the line twice at 2 races, but I attended in crude paced 10 other ultras this year. So a total of 12 ultra experiences this year, 2 starting. So I think I want to make that more of like a 6 and 6 endeavor for next year. And I'm actually excited to start off this year running the Arches 50K in January. So I am starting this year off with a 50K race in southern Utah come January, kind of just to get things going and go from there. But that's kind of my big one. OBU, if you go on the entrance list, you can see my name that I'm technically signed up for that one. But the Ridge Runners, we missed out on our weekly meeting yesterday, and we're trying to kind of figure out some details in regards to something kind of special that we could do at that race. So, if something kind of takes place in that way, I'll actually not be running that race because I'll be involved regardless. But that's one where I'm probably never going to miss that race because that's such a special backyard ultra in the history of it. So running plans, that's kind of what I got for now.
Great. Well, since you always ask everybody what their walk-up song would be, let us know what that would be.
All right, Cam, pressure's on you.
Okay, that's good. So when I made that playlist, right, I remember I initially asked just a few random folks for a couple songs. I didn't want to have an empty playlist because I came up with the idea before the Cascade Crest 2020, or not Cascade Crest, I'm sorry, Canal Corridor 2020 episode. Wrong CC. But, before that episode, so I put a song of my own on there, and I remember I put on Bendiciones by Bad Bunny, which is a wonderful song. But it kind of changes the whole vibe when you put randomly reggaeton on a playlist where the rest of the music is in English. So I think I'm going to give a more on-brand edition, and I'm going to say Blinding Lights by The Weeknd.
Nice.
All right.
Good choice. I did not think you were going to go that direction.
I like that Cam still surprises you though, Wes.
Oh, he surprises me daily. You never know what he's getting up to. But for me, my walk-up song, this has been the hardest question that I've been thinking about for almost 7 days since we decided to do this live show. And I could go so many different directions with it. And originally I was going to throw a country song on there because there's not enough country on this playlist, I will say. And at mile 70, when I turn on the music for 7 miles, I did listen to Florida Georgia Line, Luke Bryan, my guys to get me going a little bit. But if I had to pick one song to go on the playlist, it's Just a Dream by Nelly.
Nice.
All right.
Good picks.
Cool. All right. One last question before we get to another question in the chat. Would you rather fight one chicken on one day or day one, 2 chickens on day 2? You know how the story goes. Or 365 chickens on the 365th day, or fight one mountain lion after training for 365 days and you get a sword and a shield of armor. Which one would you choose?
I feel like I've already made my choice now on this one, and it's mountain lion 10 times out of 10. I think if I've got a year to train, it's fine. I'm not worried about it at all. And then the other thing is, everybody is overestimating their ability to kill chickens with their bare hands, and then they're overestimating their mental health and their mental strength. I couldn't murder that many animals personally and still be mentally put together, and then just their time. You can't run, you can't be a person and kill 120 chickens in a day. And then you've got to wake up and do that all again tomorrow. I could train, I've trained 15 hours a week when I put in peak weeks, just turn all of that into a mountain lion training. And then, the fight's over in 5 minutes and I'm dead, and death is a thing that I've accepted, it's inevitable, or I just killed a mountain lion with a sword. And I probably have some explaining to do to like the Montana Fish and Wildlife department, but I'm fine and I can go back to running.
Yeah, no, you summed it up perfectly, Cam. If you're not pro mountain lion on this one, you're doing it wrong. So I'm with you on that.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to ask one of the questions that you always ask your guests, which is if you could run with a person, any one person in the history of the world, who would that be? Want to take it first, Cam?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you definitely go. I was gonna think about this one.
Yeah, no, we'll give you some time to think about it. The answer is my grandma. She passed away in 2016, 50 days actually after my grandfather, her husband, passed away. 50 days to the day, and I spent because my grandfather was very sick. I spent the last 2 or 3 months of his life living with her and caring for him, and just because she wasn't physically able to do all the things, like getting him up and out of the wheelchair and stuff, that I could do for her. That was a really difficult time for everybody involved. But my grandma, she was having her own health issues actually at the time, and that she kept secret from everybody actually to kind of keep everybody together and focus on caring for my grandfather, because he couldn't care for himself at all, basically. In that time, we were literally spoon feeding him. And I just, when I found out about it, because it was, that's why she passed on 50 days after him, that a lot of what I've thought about since then is the kind of strength and, just sort of like courage that it takes to do something like that for then so long, while you're also having this person that you've, dedicated your life to and with, dying in this way, that I want to get that chance to talk to her about it again, and she would not understand it. She did not understand running. She would not want to go running, she grew up very poor in rural Appalachia and would not have just, like, why are you running through the woods? You could be doing so many other things, But then I think, the chance to get to hear from her about, why she did that and the kind of courage that took, but then also to talk to her about what has changed for me and how I've grown in the past 5 years and all the changes that I've gone through and everything that I wanted to tell her and talk to her about, that would just be so special to me. So that's the answer, my grandma.
Yeah, I love that answer, Cam. And I love the idea of using the idea of a run to get more time and the opportunity to talk with someone that you care about so much. And then also to drag her out into the woods against her will and make her go for a run with you, even though she's this person who obviously means so much to you. So I love every aspect of that. That's lovely.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And it's not that my grandma is, anti going out into the woods,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got pictures of her. I always laughed and I used to joke with her. We've got pictures of her like bow hunting, she was not your typical like 1960s housewife.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But, she literally looked like if you dressed Barbie up in G.I. Joe's clothes, it was so funny. But, she would spend time out in the woods, but it was, just running through them, would be a big change for her. And then just running in general, was a thing that she wouldn't understand as a hobby. But yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of for me, kind of along the same sentiment, it would be my mom. I lost her at a young age, so I always just kind of heard stories. She was a pretty awesome cross-country runner, and she was a pretty good endurance athlete as well. She's biked across, I think, the state of Ohio a couple times. So that would be the person for me that if I could have one run with someone, it would definitely be my mom.
Yeah. It's great to see
So
how, that I think, inspires and influences both of you to think about how you would spend that time out in the woods. That's great. Well, I know Marianna and I are struggling a little bit because we're running out of time, but there's so many things we want to ask. So we're going to try to keep ourselves focused to just 2 more questions. I'm going to ask one from the chat, a question from Josh about Ridge Runners. What are any Ridge Runner projects that are in the pipeline for 2022? Any more thoughts about race documentaries. You kind of hinted that there might be something coming up. So yeah, what plans can you tell us about for the next year or so?
Yeah. Go for it, Cam.
I don't know what we want to commit to, but you know,
this is recorded.
Yeah,
I know, right?
A lot of ideas.
Yeah, and we need to have a meeting. And I know Wesley and the way he is. He's gonna clip this and throw this up on Instagram in like 4 days. You know, like what can you expect from the Ridge Runners in 2022?
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna say is that we are up to something. And you know, you might see us at our usual hunts. You know, Wesley already talked about Ohio's Backyard Ultra. We might be close friends with that Arlen Glick guy. We'll see. You know, that might be the same weekend as the Missoula Marathon. I don't know. We've maybe done some preliminary looking at dates and such. But you know, we're gonna leave it open. But also, as we did last year, come December, we're gonna open up you know, kind of a year in review survey. We want to hear from all of y'all, and I'll get to work on that probably, you know, soon enough. And if there are documentaries that you guys want to see, or places where you want to see coverage, you know, like, hey, there's this really cool race in Alabama, you know, that nobody's ever been to, but it's on the East Coast. It doesn't get any media coverage, and there's all the media coverage in the world. We'll see. I know Wesley's got a frequent flyer card. We're gonna get out and we're gonna get around because we're up to something.
Yeah, and kind of just piggybacking off that, you know, this year we've got 2 more films currently in post-production right now in the editing world. So we've got the Grand Tetons adventure from our whole 36-mile circumnavigation there. So that'll be released in the coming months, as well as JD3's story of his first 100-mile Road to 100 kind of final documentation. You know, we were out there for Burning River 100 and Canal Corridor 100, so we have, like I said, hours and hours of footage, and that should be another awesome story to kind of keep your eyes on. But yeah, going past that, like I said, we're up to something, and yeah, we'll get to see what's up in 2022.
Can't wait to see it. Well, a fitting way to end this episode would be a question from Bryant Baker, the race director of Rim to River 100. So for both of you guys, if somebody asks you, what is Rim to River like? And you could only answer in one sentence. Go.
I'll go ahead and start. That seems to be the trend here. But what I'm going to say is it's going to piggyback from Wesley's thing that he said in his prediction video, but it's and especially as somebody like me who didn't grow up in a really healthy family environment, it's Rim to River 100 is a family reunion where you actually love your whole family.
That's awesome.
That's a lot better than anything I'll come up with. But I will take the 50% credit on the front end of that. But
you started it, you know.
If I had to say, you know, Rim to River 100 is the best decision you'll ever make. So if you're considering doing a 100-mile distance, that's the one to do.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, none of us can get into the race again.
Right.
I'm gonna have to email Brian when I finally come back. Like, can you please save me a spot?
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, I know it's a lottery now, but come on.
I definitely think it's going to sell out faster and
Quick.
faster every year.
Quick.
Yeah, because the word is spreading. So.
Are you guys going back next year to run, to pace, to crew?
I expect I'll be there in some form or another. I don't know about racing it again. We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, I would love to. Just depending on how my program goes, I'll be in clinicals. So they don't really tell us much. It's very unpredictable. I could be working like 80 hours a week in the hospital. So, but
that
I'd love
seems
to
super conducive to doing 100.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
It's like the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how I felt after crewing and pacing and then coming back and taking an exam at 8 a.m. the next morning, but it's cool.
Yeah. I think from the very first moment last year being on that course, I just knew I'd want to keep coming back.
Definitely.
I don't know exactly in what form that's always going to be, but I do hope to get to come back again.
I will say the crewing and pacing scene was very enjoyable without having to run the 100 miles. So I'll definitely be back to do that at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys so much for being open to this. It's hard being on the other end, and you guys are both very vulnerable and I just appreciate your willingness to let us ask you the questions and answer some of the questions that are coming in the chat. You never know what's going to come in. And it's been really fun to get to chat with you guys and get to know you a little bit more. And I think I want to speak for kind of everyone that I think it just is really exciting to get to hear things from your perspective instead of just having you guys ask the questions all the time. So thank you for this opportunity and for being willing to kind of take a risk and try something new.
Yeah, and to follow that up, thank you for the idea. You know, for Bridge Generation members that don't know, like Sarah pitched this idea to us, and once we kind of got the idea, we were like, yes, we're going to do this, and we just felt incredibly honored that you wanted to come on here and hear our stories. So thank you both of you for allowing us to do so.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And it was really cool to learn about your background because you know about so many other runners' backgrounds, but I feel like we don't hear about you guys. So I think that was really cool for everybody to hear, like Sarah said, and we really appreciate it. It was much more enjoyable being on this end, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, thanks, guys. I can't remember. Is there something official we're supposed to do to wrap up?
No, I think we're good on that note. Subscribe to the channel if you've made it this far. And you aren't. I don't know what you're doing here still, but you know. And then give us all a follow on Instagram, Strava, all the social medias. And we're gonna be back with you for the next episode of Ridge Runners Live.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks.